Watch the ride.
Hey everybody, you join me on a quite cold day, and I'm going to be remaking the video I made many years ago, quite badly, called The Remnants of War. Basically, I live on Hayling Island, that's Portsmouth over there, and during World War II there was a lot of stuff that went on here, and there's a lot of bits left over. So I'm actually in this video going to show you all of the stuff I can from the bottom of the island, around the island, and up into the top. And as if it was just trying to prove that we're still in a very militarised area, we have an army Chinook. And there also appears to be one of our naval ships. And just to the right of that, you can see one of the forts, of which there are three. One, two. The third one's much further down. These forts actually predate World War II by quite a way. In fact, I believe they were built in about the 1880s, 1890s. As preparations for fear of Napoleon III basically attacking England. So these were put in place to protect us from France. But what they did in World War II is they strung anti-submarine nets between them, apparently, which meant that basically the area was cut off from submarines, which is obviously something we wanted to happen because our main port, Portsmouth, is just around that corner. So obviously in this area, you've got a lot of ships protecting the sea. There's no land invasion at this point, so the problem is going to be the air. They're going to want to bomb Portsmouth in the dockyards, and that's what Hayling basically helped with. But the reason I'm out here on this extreme end is that a lot of the emplacements I'm going to show you and look at in this video today were actually put in just before World War II kicked off during the phony war stage. Now, to my understanding, that was basically when they thought it was going to all kick off, and then it didn't, and then it did. So these were very early measures, and you'll find these all over the country, but very much on the south coast, where they were protecting from invasion. I think it's very important that these things still survive to teach the story of that, you know, World War is a terrible thing, and it wasn't even that long ago that we were last in it. And there she is. So obviously, this is a defensive gun emplacement, a lookout post. It is a pillbox. So they're hexagonal, and they're made of concrete and shingle, which would have been taken off the beach. There's some wires in this, it's interesting. Obviously you've got the gun ports each side. Is this one open? It is. So I'm 6'4", so this is a bit of a squeeze for me. Oh, we're in. So, got a lot of crap in here. So if you can imagine from in here, you can see down that way, down that way. Oh God. You wouldn't have been able to stand up in here, even a shorter guy. I wouldn't necessarily advise coming in these. This is full of different paraphernalias and broken glass. But that gives you an idea of what our guys were doing inside these, not being very comfortable. Now I think there may well be more pillboxes, a couple of them, inside the golf course which is there, which I can't get access to, so I can't show you that. But this, as I say, is the bottom corner, closest to Portsmouth, looking over the sea. Got these beaches which could have been landed on if the Germans actually did try to invade. The interesting thing though, as you can see, is they've actually built it on a slightly raised bit, so it kind of looks above everything, but on a nice level line. So if you see someone coming over the horizon, they're going to be very obvious to you from there. I'm now going to move from the southwest corner up towards the car park, where I'm going to get back on my bike, and I'll take you around the corner to see part of the Moldwe Harbor, which was used for the D-Day landings. We've come from down there, walking up, that's where the forts are out there again, and if you look over here, you can see it's pretty fortified over that side. Not sure if that's directly related to war stuff or whether it just happens to be there, but the looks of it, I think it probably does. Also, as you can see, there's a lot of concrete works along here. I think this also ages from the same time. So we've got all this concrete works as well. Now I don't, again, know exactly what this was, but it's always been here, I've always known it to be here. It's obviously broken up a long time ago. That's a Very modern looking piece of metal embedded in that one, so I'm not quite sure what's going on with that. That's stainless steel, I think. But these are the old ones. You can see they're very strong. I think these are designed possibly to stop tanks getting through if they manage to land. And you see there's a lot more of these just large concrete blocks dropped along this edge. Okay, well that was the longest part I have to walk. Most of the other stuff is pretty accessible. And the next thing are these giant concrete weights of some sort. So as you can see, there's one there, there's some walls, another one here, and another one down here, and more of this concrete enforcings, and it's pretty big. So, need a fishing weight. These things are massive. I don't know their exact purpose, but I can only assume it was for tying down something. A ship, maybe it was to do with the Moldwe Harbor, which we'll get to, but you can see this is pretty heavily reinforced. These double buttress walls, and a lot more of it has actually been exposed. Like this was covered in earth before now, and they seem to be letting it erode away and expose what's here. You can tell from the shapes in the corners, this is obviously just planked and battened, and then they poured the concrete in different layers. I mean, you can almost see a split where they did a different mix at some point. And all this stuff is sort of modern rubble that you got bits of just normal stones, bits of brick and all sorts mixed in, so that's overfill, much more recent. So everything I've shown you up to now is pretty standard fare. Defences that you would expect in a place like this during World War II. What's on the other side over here is not something you'd see many places. In fact, there's only a couple of places you'll ever see these. Okay, so this is basically the entrance to Langstone Harbour. We've been walking up of it this whole time, but it's that thing out there that's a little different. Okay, this concrete structure out here is something we call the Moldwe Harbor. The actual whole thing was the Moldwe Harbor. This is just one of the phoenixes. And basically what this was they built a load of these floating concrete boxes. They built 4 of them here locally. They built lots more around the south coast. And they were basically built for D-Day and the Normandy landings. What they were was a movable harbour. So they're concrete poured. They made them, as I say, in a few places around here. 4 of them were made here. They had a workforce of 600 men. And they were waiting here, and as the run-up of D-Day and Normandy and all of that, they had these, and they were transporting them around the south coast by pulling them along because they floated. And then they sunk them to hide them, because you can sink and lift these things. And then they took them over and built a small harbour over in Normandy, which helped them get stuff off of boats much quicker, because otherwise it would have been trying to get big boats to little boats onto the beach. That gave them the ability to moor a big boat and just take the cargo off. Unfortunately, some of them didn't want to come unstuck off the seabed after they hid them under the water, and that may have been what happened to this one, but I think this is more to do with it cracked as they were floating it out. The thing cracked, they couldn't do anything with it, so they just left it where it is, and now, over the course of time, it has broken into 3 pieces. I hope you can work out there's a middle section, and then there's 2 end sections, and they are angles, but they should be straight. So the whole thing should be like a box, with a fat box at the bottom, with a smaller box on the top. So obviously this area has been used for the entire war, because we got stuff from the phony war before it all kicked off, until stuff that was much later towards that thing that I looked at my entire childhood and see it regularly and don't think too much of it. I think it does drive a connection and, as I say, a memory back to World War II and the stuff that went on back then. And we shouldn't forget the human story that goes with that, really. The Moldwe Harbor was a very ingenious solution to a problem. As I say, if you want to offload cargo from a big boat, you have to get that boat to a harbour. Well, if they haven't got a harbour for you to use, you have to offload it to smaller boats and then take that onto the shore and land those, and that just becomes more and more difficult. Build floating concrete boxes that raise up and down out of the sea, and I'm sure that's why they were called phoenixes, because of the rising phoenix. Oh yes, there is one pillbox over there which is in the bushes I can't really show you, which is very much like the first one we saw, and it's very much like this one. This is obviously same design as the other pillbox on the other side, but this one has been shut off. They've put steel plates inside, they've locked up, well, they've plated up the door, so I can't get in that. These walls look about the same age, or part of them does, but I believe this is actually related to a pig farm, which is probably older, so it may not have been related to the war, those constructions. So as I say, Hayling in the past helped with the war and protecting Portsmouth in sort of, well, a few ways, but you know, to look out over the sea to see what's incoming, but also for air defences. And this is where the anti-aircraft site comes in, and this has got a much more human story attached to it because people here did die. So as you can see, we've got gun emplacements here. These are pictures from the time, I'll show you, but just pay attention to sort of these long tracks. So these two matching structures are gun enclosures, or gun bases, or, you know, gun emplacements. In the middle of here used to be, it may still be under the ground, but you can't see it anymore, a big, like a railway ring in the ground, and that's what the gun pivoted on. Now in the early days, they used, they had some naval guns basically off of ships, but they very quickly exchanged those for anti-aircraft guns, because obviously Portsmouth just being over there, anyone coming over this way, you've got a nice open sight of the sky, and you can lay down fire, flak, and try and stop the bombers getting through. And obviously there are some slight changes to this because they've tried to make it safe for people, but to my understanding there will be a door behind here, and this is one of the batteries, you know, where you keep all your artillery shells and such. Here's the second one, as I say, exactly the same. In fact, is that the doorway? Maybe, not entirely sure. But yeah, this is the second one. Obviously the benches have been put in. They didn't have the benches. They didn't sit around like having a cup of tea while they're firing off anti-aircraft guns. And these concrete walkways are the walkways down to where there was a lot of buildings here. There was a lot of people. It was a big base, as it were. Well, this place, the gun emplacements, they got bombed in 1941. 30 people were injured and 6 gunners, I believe, were killed. But if you remember the picture I showed you earlier on with the path coming down, this is that path, and it was looking this way because you had the buildings and parts of the base built up on this grass. And it's just a sort of a small grid pattern, really. You've just got crossing roads, one goes all the way over there, back round and out, and then you've just got a little block in the middle here. It's just very weird to think that the boots of the men and the women of that time, they wore this surface down as they were walking around, as they were defending themselves from Germany. And this isn't even that long ago, you know? But it's being forgotten very quickly, which is, again, why I say I think having this stuff around, as ugly as an old piece of concrete might be, is very important to remind us to not go down that route again. It doesn't lead to anything good. So obviously being in this area, there was a lot of fighting and defending going on. You may say, well, does that mean there's a lot of unexploded ordnance around? And the answer is basically yes, there is. A lot of it gets washed up out to sea quite regularly after storms. Small bombs, big bombs. I used to find ammunition when I was a kid. I remember we once came across this round metal looking thing. Now, you know, normally you might think, oh, it's a round metal thing. But because where we live, we're like, that could be a round piece of metal, or it could be some form of mine. So let's just leave that where it is. It's been there for the past 60, 70 years at that point, or wherever it was. So we can leave it alone. Like when we're out on the sandbanks and stuff like that. So this is a bunker. You've got a few feet of concrete here, reinforcements. And I can't actually get in here to show you because the council now use it as a storage area for stuff that they use, because they've just had to shut a gate on it and it's all locked away. But as you can or cannot see in there, there's a building and another storage bit. There's a few obviously bunkers and storage parts in here that they wanted to protect. It's not huge by any means, but Christ, I bet they're glad for it. I mean, look at the size of the reinforcing in this. This is not small stuff. As we walk back around the site, we've got the gun emplacements over there, so we've done a big circle. We've got these, which locally are known as the mounds. the rabbits, because there's always rabbits here, Teletubby Hills. But actually, underneath here, a few years ago, someone put their foot straight through and they discovered that there is actually a building underneath this, which I think was probably a command centre or an officer's quarters or some sort of protected thing that was actually buried at the time. But it's still there and we haven't excavated it yet, which I don't understand. It would be very interesting too, but then maybe they'll just say, well, it's just another concrete box. Okay, we need to get up here for a vantage point. You can just tell this is hollow, but only just. Right, yes, this lot. This has changed a lot. I don't know if the lake was here at the time. These are bunkers, and you've got more of these storage concrete bins, as it were. But you can't get in there because that's the local fishing lake. That is Sinai Lake, which is an old gravel pit, which is now a fishing lake, as I say. But again, more bunkers, more stuff going on here. Now, something that wasn't immediately apparent before now, because there was a lot more trees along that back line, and you probably might not be able to see because there's bright sunshine at the moment, is from here I can see the sea. I can see over all that beachhead, straight onto the sea, because where we started was over that side. We walked up that way, around that way, and then we've come back down on ourselves. But from here, you can actually see the horizon of the sea all the way around there. You've got obviously a massive amount of sky to see, and if you're a pivoting anti-aircraft gun, well, it's a good spot. Yet due to the way that they've built these, if you were out at sea looking in, you're probably not going to be able to find these as the gun emplacements necessarily. So, good strategical positioning there. You can see from another angle there, this is where all those buildings were. And this one, as you can see, is just a very large brick-built looking bunker. Due to the difference in construction, I don't know if it's of the same age. It may very well be. Now, as you may or may not know, my family, without going into great details, has been around this area for a very long time. And we were naval during the war. Most of my family was naval. Did pretty well in it. And even my mum's brother was in the Navy until he died at a too early age, should we say. A little bit more about Hayling if you're unaware. Hayling Island is a small island on the south coast of England. It's 4 miles long, 5 miles wide. We have about 18,000 people living here now. And due to its very close proximity to Portsmouth, Portsea Island, Portsmouth is an island. It is not connected to the mainland. Not a lot of people realise that. There are bridges on, and that is that. There is sea in between. But because of its location and similar size to Portsmouth, they used to use Hayling as a bit of a decoy target by putting lights on it and hoping that the Germans would bomb here rather than bombing the Portsmouth dockyards themselves. But the dockyards did get hit. They also did the same on a place called Farlington Marshes, and I've been out there and seen the bomb craters. They are massive, maybe 20 foot, 15, 20 foot wide, maybe 8 feet, 10 feet at the deepest, and they're just big pock marks that are just blown out of the mud, the marsh there, and they still exist, some of them, and they've filled with water and they've ended up being little wildlife sanctuaries, you know, little ponds with bushes and stuff and reeds, and they're actually great for life. It's kind of interesting that actually. The same as the Moldwe Harbor. How something was created in a war, once it's abandoned, can convert and turn into something which is very useful for wildlife. That thing, we know it's full of crabs and conger eels and fish. It's an artificial reef at this point, and it's probably had a great impact to the sea life around here. It's given something solid, something they can hide in. So we've come from the southwestern end, we are now at the southeastern end. And there's not nearly as much stuff going on over this side, mainly because, you know, we're further away than from Portsmouth. This wasn't the end they were going to necessarily invade from. Now, throughout my childhood, I'd seen lots of these around. Now, to my understanding, I always thought these were moorings, as in you put that under the sea with a chain on it, it gets buried into the mud, and that's where you tie your boat up. You know, when you have a buoy out there and you tie your boat onto it, that's the thing it's attached to. But I've also seen claims that these were anti-tank things. Don't know if I believe that myself. I think they're just moorings. I can't find them, but from the same source that was suggesting those are anti-tank things, as in they'd stop tanks getting over them, and I'm not buying that myself. I see a tank getting straight over that. there were these low down like concrete plinths with boxes in them, and they were suggesting that that was a low level lookout position. So if you imagine my keyring, available in the description by the way, is Hayling. You have Portsmouth here, you have Farlington Marshes in between, you've got Thorney Island over that side. We're on this side, we were on this side before, which is the Langstone Harbour side, and this is going north, and this is the Chichester Harbour side. So we're now at the other inlet, because obviously in Ireland you've got to have water all the way around you. Now this was actually well protected because you've got Selsey, which is off there, which sticks out much further. That was a lookout point, I believe, because they could see much further over into the channel. They could give warning to Portsmouth, Southampton, everyone if something was coming. I don't believe the Germans would have been stupid enough to try and come through this side, but then equally they probably would have been even dumber to try and go through the other side, but they fortified that end far more than this end. Okay, so now we've come off the bottom of the island. I have skipped over one pillbox, which I did show in my original video, which was, as I say, exactly the same design as the first and the second. I can't actually get that close to it, and I can't get inside it, I don't believe, so I thought, save going to that one. I'm going to go to one that I've vaguely remember seeing in the past. Not a pillbox though, it's another gun emplacement that I didn't really know what it was at the time. So you can probably guess from the strategy, they're protecting the southern half of the island, and yet, in the middle of the island, with fields all around, and it would have been clearer in the past, we find another pillbox. But this one is of a different construction. This one's brick, it's much bigger, it's got smaller ports, and only one on each side. I won't attempt to clamber in there because there is an awful lot of rubbish, but as you can imagine, it's actually, it's completely open. That's one thing to note. There's no central like pillar, but the wall is 2 foot thick, if not 3. That thing was, well, it was made to last. So it showed that they did keep in mind that even though they were most worried about the bottom of the island, they still put lookouts and defences in the middle. When you live around this stuff and you see it every day, it's very easy to take it for granted and just accept it as being part of the landscape. But obviously for a lot of people in the UK, you don't get to see stuff like this. And for some people around the world, particularly people in America, they find this sort of stuff fascinating because it's, well, because I don't believe they ever really prepared for an invasion from Germany. We were, you know, we were close. We were on their list. There is a joke in there for you somewhere. Okay, we're now at the very north of the island, and we're going on a bit of a hunt for this anti-aircraft position, which is kind of hidden in some bushes, I believe, but we might be able to get a view. Now, I hope you're enjoying this video. As I say, I did make this video in the past, but not very well. I hope I've done a better job this time. But this is also leading into opening up to possibly doing more videos like this, because obviously living in a place like this next to Portsmouth with all this history around me that I'm very interested in, why don't I get out there and make some videos and show it and share it with you guys that might not get the opportunity? Now, I'm no expert, I'm no historian, I may get a few bits wrong here and there. If people want to add some things in or clarify anything that you know about these sorts of things, feel free to add it to the comments. But as I say, if you do enjoy this video, please consider leaving a like, subscribing to my channel, and if you feel like supporting me some way, there's links in the description and ways to do that, which will help me make videos like this, because obviously today's video has been a bit of a mission. Okay, so we're currently on a public footpath in a field on the north end of the island, and there is a big bush up there. I've just noticed this building they use as the stables. The construction of that looks exactly the same as the other World War II stuff, and I would almost be willing to bet that that is a repurposed structure. Oh, that's a real shame. I can't see into it. I couldn't remember which angle it was at. But this, I've seen pictures from the inside of this, is another one of those gun emplacements, presumably anti-aircraft, but it's weird. Did they cover it in that stuff? You can see it's concrete, but it's been covered in this weird covering of some sort, like lead or asphalt or something, I don't know. But yep, that is another gun emplacement, and this location is pretty much at the far north end of the island, slap bang in the middle. So we first started in that corner of the island down that way, moved across the other stuff that way, and we got stuff over here. So you can see they're really protecting that bottom left corner. And this is just sort of secondary stuff here because, as I say, not only do you have Selsey and that looking out that way, but you also have all the forts up on the hill which overlook this entire area. Well, okay, thank you very much for joining me. I hope you found that interesting. I hope it was clearer than the first attempt at this video that I made a few years ago. And also, as I say, this should be a jumping off point for a new series of videos where I go and see different things from around the area that I live in, because I'm kind of spoiled that there's all this stuff around that I could just go and see and would be very interesting to many people. I haven't taken advantage of that yet, so it's time to. Anyway, catch you next time. If you enjoyed this video and the other content on the channel, please consider following the links in the description to show your support.